Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Jan Mercer-Doms. I'm the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. You are joining us today for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show, hosted every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to check out all of our upcoming activities, our workshops, and our live streams, and more ways that you too can become a member and get involved with helping women to create the new future as we move forward during this really significant moment in time. Check us out at joinmayshad.com. I invite all of you to type in your questions and comments into the feed bar, and this taping will be available afterwards as well for your viewing if you join our YouTube channel. Today, we have a really very special theme planned for you around storytelling and the art of personal narrative as it creates impact from an inclusion perspective. I'm joined today with two very special guests who professionally and personally have dedicated their lives to enhancing how we think above and beyond traditional modes and mechanisms for achieving diversity in the workplace. I'm joined today with Patricia Garcia-Gomez. Hi, Patricia, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And Ben Lichtenwalner. Hi, Ben, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And I'm really excited today, especially because Patricia's got the most amazing background. And so we may hear some birds chirping in the background, which I think lends itself really nicely to a really fun, organic Tuesday afternoon conversation with everyone out there. Patricia Garcia-Gomez is a chief adventurist, love that title, chief adventurist at Aegis Travel, and an award-winning strategic thinker, artist, and brander. Patricia is dedicated to using creativity as a powerful catalyst for connection, working with visionary leaders from startup to Fortune 500 companies to design for the soul. She's authored the story of some of the most amazing, biggest brands and some of its most beloved founders. Her secret mission is to shine a light on brave, beautiful female creators. She's also an artist, and her permanent collection can be seen at the Tate Modern, the New York Museum of Art and Design, Santa Barbara Museum, and many, many others. Welcome again, Patricia.
Thank you.
Ben Lichtenwalner is the founder of Radiant Forest. Ben's leadership and technology serves him well as a keynote speaker, author, and consultant. He raises servant leadership awareness and adoption while building servant-led organizations. He is the author of the critically acclaimed book, Paradigm Flip, Leading People, Teams, and Organizations Beyond the Social Media Revolution, and founder of Radiant Forest, as well as—
Hang on.
Ben, you can't.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jan Mercer-Doms, and I am the VP of U.S. Development for Mayshad Choice. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, organizations, and institutions that champion equity for women professionally and personally. You are joining us today for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show, hosted every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to join us at joinmayshad.com to learn more about our upcoming programming and how you too can become a member and help us together create new opportunities for women as we move together in this new crazy world. I am joined today with Patricia Garcia-Gomez. Hi, Patricia, welcome.
Hi, Jan, thank you.
You're welcome. And Ben Lichtenwalner. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Jan.
So Patricia Garcia-Gomez is a chief adventurist. I love that job title. We have to learn more about what that means at Aegis Travel, and an award-winning strategic thinker, artist, and brander. Patricia is dedicated to using creativity as a powerful catalyst for connection and working with visionary leaders from startups to Fortune 500s to design for the soul. She's authored some of the world's biggest brands and some of its most beloved entrepreneurs. Her secret mission is to shine a light on brave, beautiful creators, female creators at that. Her art as an artist is also on permanent collection at the Tate Modern, the New York Museum of Art and Design, the Santa Barbara Museum, and many, many others. Welcome again, Patricia. And welcome Ben Lichtenwalner. Ben is the founder of Radiant Forest. A servant leader and technology keynote speaker, author, and consultant, Ben raises servant leadership awareness and adoption while building servant-led organizations. He is the author of the critically acclaimed book, Paradigm Flip, Leading People, Teams, and Organizations Beyond the Social Media Revolution, and founder, of course, of Radiant Forest, as well as modernservantleader.com. He's also served in very diverse senior leadership roles in organizations such as Teach for America, Whirlpool, and Herman Miller. Welcome again, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
One of the things I'm most thrilled about in this episode today is that you both live and breathe inclusion and diversity in very unique and very different, think outside the box ways. And in preparation for today's show, we talked a lot about how we're showing up right now and what in this moment in time are we doing to hold space for ourselves and for others, knowing that this moment in time can be very exhilarating, but also very draining. Ben, talk to us a bit about what you're experiencing for yourself right now.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's very exhilarating and very draining. It's mountains and valleys almost daily right now. We in our household, we're a biracial family, and we've got some thrilling things about what's going on that we're seeing, some real progress for the first time in decades, and then you've got, of course, a lot of just terrible things in the news. So we find ourselves on a bit of a roller coaster ride. We definitely find physical fitness being key in the mornings, getting out, getting some exercise to get going in the day, and then creating space for ourselves around social media. We're finding some new friends and supporting causes and going to protests together. And then we're also finding people that we thought we knew, and they're just not worth the energy trying to educate or change their mind on something. So we're also saying goodbye to a lot of people who we've known for a long time. But it's too draining, and we have to keep our energy for the right activities. So yeah, we've been doing a little bit of both, celebrating and remorsing as we have to say goodbye to some folks too.
Ben, and thank you for that. I think that for us also at Mayshad, what we're finding is the exact same conversations are happening for us, both in the sense of who do we really want to surround ourselves and what kind of energy do we want to have in our worlds and our lives, knowing, to your point, that that there are some people's minds who just aren't going to change, and understanding when that moment in time is, where in the past you may have found points of commonality or areas to agree to disagree. But I think now, particularly given the global pandemic that really, again, has brought to light so many of the inequalities that we face as a country each and every day, there's a point at which you just can't turn the other cheek anymore and say, we also have a responsibility as individual citizens of this country to really do the right thing and speak up when it is needed to speak up.
Yes.
Patricia, what is coming up for you right now? How are you holding space for yourself and for others?
How I hold space has been changing so much from the start of quarantine till now. But, one thing that's been really important for me, I started doing daily walks at the beginning of quarantine, and they were short. They were half an hour. Then progressively they got longer, and they got to be 8 miles a day. And then I started a walking group with 3 other women, and they're not women that I know, but we had met each other casually, and we've been meeting now. We've had our 120th walk this last week, and we meet every day at 3, except for today because I'm here. And it's been really grounding because we don't know each other, but there's a real freedom because whoever we are in the real world, however we would dress, whatever identity we would present is not being presented. And instead, we're in real conversation, we're in community, we're helping each other. If one's going to the market, the other one does some shopping, we share information. And so that's been really nice. And then I think also for me personally, and this has been more recently, I've just shifted how I'm looking at everything, because there was a time when I felt like, I just need to do the right thing. I was making myself available to a lot of conversations and working really hard. And then that became overwhelming because I realized this is more work than I can do. But I think it's a really powerful moment in time where the power is all of us as a collective experiencing something at the same time. But then going back and believing that my role is actually it's smaller within this collective to do the human thing within this collective that reverberates out, and just ask myself, how can I be in this moment with authenticity and creativity and build a bigger container to listen and to be aware and to learn, and really open myself up for that and bring in new people and experiences and new conversations. And that to me feels like a really strong place to stand. So that's where I am currently right now.
I think it's interesting in the sense of just our identities, right? And I hear that in both of what you just opened with, in the sense of identity is complex and we're not just one thing. And the way in which we experience the world through our early socialization processes, the families we were born into, really create opportunities in very different ways for different people, depending upon how they identify and how you're perceived and experienced by others as well. Right? I would love to learn more about, from both of your perspectives, the work that you do personally and professionally. How is your personal narrative guided into how you live your professional role now? Ben, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I've always had this passionate feeling about what leadership should be, and it stemmed from some personal experiences with some bad bosses. We've all had them at some point in our career, and if you haven't, look out, it's coming. Somebody will at some point. At some point.
Done.
So, after a particularly challenging episode, I found myself wondering, how would I define leadership? Because I didn't know, what meant a good leader to me. So that evolved into a passion that became my career, and it remains what I'm doing today. In that, I'm just so passionate about helping people become their best leaders. So, our tagline at Radiant Force is we help fix and prevent bad boss behaviors, because people aren't bad people, they're bad bosses, present bad behaviors. And today, with all that's going on in the world, it's been fascinating to see, the sort of category we fit into is leadership development. And for a lot of leadership developers, the effort has actually increased, whereas just about every other sort of management consulting, except for DEI, has kind of gone down since COVID. And now with the all the Black Lives Matter movement and all the racial inequity that's come up, you see a lot more leaders looking to be more genuine this time, which I think is great. So it's been exciting to see lately how that's kind of come about. You see more people looking to be more authentic, more genuine, and more sincere with their DEI initiatives.
And do you feel like the work that you do around the theme of bad bosses, and I love what you said around people aren't bad people, they're bad bosses.
Right, nobody wakes up. Yeah.
Do you think that this is also a moment in time for, no matter how we grade ourselves and grade others on kind of the spectrum of good to bad, how can we as individuals use this as a different sort of wake-up call to ourselves, knowing that we're not going back to the old world, right? So here's a moment in time to be better, to do better, but knowing that it has to go beyond the slogans that we all use and post on social media, that there really has to be some action behind that, right? And so how do we move beyond being supportive of something, being supportive of a social justice cause, and actually as leaders, no matter if we're corporate executives, entrepreneurs, or business owners, which this, the Mayshad audience encompasses all of that, how do we really step into this in a different way?
Yeah, I love the way you use that, because it's the slogans, right? Because everybody, especially in our digital media world, everybody wants to present the beautiful side of their lives and make themselves look the best possible way. And I think we're finding more and more individuals being more authentic. And I love the example, Patricia, you gave around people and their identity and their walk, and they're finding that they're not having to present that identity that they might normally during a professional world. I think we're finding a lot of people who are finding themselves at home. I joke because I keep hearing everybody say, now you got all this time because of COVID and the quarantine. And I find myself saying, who's got more time? I've got less time, But for those who are blessed enough to have more time, depending on the situation, obviously, if you've lost your job, that's not a blessing. But you know what I mean? If you are finding yourself with more time, a lot of people are doing a lot more self-discovery and self-recognition. And they're starting to say, hey, even if they have lost their jobs, maybe they're reconsidering what they want to be doing it or who they want to be doing it for. I think the beauty of that sort of self-discovery combined with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the racial injustices being exposed is it's becoming more acceptable to admit our faults. And what I mean by that is you find more and more people saying, you know what, I'm not perfect. And you know what, it's okay. But the key is that I recognize that and I'm trying to move forward. I know one of your people who spoke on the last episode of this DEI series mentioned the book White Fragility, which I love. And one of the best things in that book is they talk about how racism is not binary. It's not good or bad. It's not one or the other. But we live in a society in which it's impossible to not have at least some implicit biases around race, around sexual identity, and around many things. And so the key is realizing that you're not one or the other, you're on a spectrum. And the key that we need to be doing is figuring out how do we move ourselves in the right direction on that spectrum. And we have to kind of all be accepting of that and realizing it. So I think that that's kind of what a lot of us are waking up to nowadays and realizing more now than ever.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Patricia, would love to get your thoughts on this as well as it pertains to the complexities of identity. And, particularly in the work that you do with Ages Magazine, that's, when we think about the intersectionality of race, class, gender, sexuality, then it's also complicated by race as well, right? Particularly now that we have 4 or 5 generations all working together under the same roof. It poses a lot of opportunities, but a lot of challenges as well. And I'd like to get more of your thoughts on that.
It does. Trying to find a way in. So it's a big conversation. I think the statistic is like we all make 11 judgments in 7 seconds when we first meet somebody. So that's how quickly the brain fires, like what it thinks it knows, which I think is good to revisit in times now. With ages, we specifically deal with ageism, and those are all the things that are triggered when you hear that somebody is of a certain age. Maybe you think that because you're over 50, you should be slowing down. Your life should be basically done, and you're going to be doing more of whatever you've been doing for the rest of time. And I don't mean to sound so negative, but these are they are kind of subtle and not subtle and gross at the same time. Or that if you haven't done it yet, chances are you're not going to do it. And there's a lot of self-judgment. And, what we stand for is a belief that many of us right now are entering into the most powerful time of their lives because a lot of things are coming together. You've had enough experience. You've had enough bad bosses. You've had enough situations that have humbled you and also, raised you up a little bit, that you're really at an inflection point and you're striving to be the best version of yourself, and you want to put that best version out in the world. And so that's what we stand for, is reinterpreting the age filter of that. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I think it's fascinating, Patricia. One of the things that you and I were talking about during the preparation for this as well is just, using this time to also check in with yourself and keeping in mind that for everything that we're all going through individually in our communities, as a collective, and just as human beings around the world, there's a lot to unpack and a lot to understand and try to make sense of. While people are getting sick, people are dying, right? And so there's kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just in the sense of staying healthy. But then right now, what does self-actualization even look like, right? And is that even then how do you bridge between what happens down here and what happens up here? And at the same time, not knowing who the person is in front of you that you may be conversing with or leading or mentoring or working alongside as a client or an employee or as a coworker. Let's talk a bit about just that context of what's happening right now around identity. And, we all make, to your point around making judgments about, experiencing something or someone for the first time. Truly, what does that mean in the sense of then how we experience others right now? Patricia, do you have additional thoughts on that?
Can you narrow it down just a tiny bit?
Let me see if I can narrow down my own question. So I guess what I'm asking is, how are we using this moment in time to understand that, okay, so we're in a diversity and inclusion show right now, right? And so those watching us may be making judgments around who's sitting around the table and who's not, right? Who's showing up and who's not, right? But then understanding that, Patricia, you have a background in history and heritage. Ben, you have a background in history and heritage. You have, biracial children. I have a history and a heritage that at first glance, that's not apparent, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do we step into our own roles as leaders, as human beings, to start to practice more patience and tolerance and understanding so that we're getting to a different solution in the sense of how we judge others, honestly, speaking to some of that implicit bias, things that go into play in the sense of how we judge others. Does that help?
It's still a big question, but I think I think right now we're in a process of like undoing and unknowing and unlearning things. And I think to actively be in that undoing is really important. And for me, what I've been thinking a lot about lately is just the importance of context that surrounds a person. Because of almost every single person that you come in contact with is such a rich human being with a context that you really don't have any idea what it's about. And partially because they present as a certain identity, but maybe also there's a woman who's been trained to survive in the corporate world by cutting off all these other limbs, you know, like the softer version of self, the kinder version of self, the one that maybe is going to get the leadership track by going this way rather than that way. And so I think, like, for me, it's been an exercise of looking back at my own career and be like, wow, the first 10 years of my career, I was a completely different human being. And I wasn't consciously play acting. But, you know, I came from a small town in Texas. I was Latina, a woman, the first in my family to be college educated. My dad drove a wrecker. I would never say these things in a meeting. You know, by the time I got into my first New York meeting, I had no Texas accent. I was like, you know, I presented like a very clean version of myself. And I believe that's where my power came from. But over time, there's been this grand unwinding. Right. And so now I feel that in that unwinding, I can stand in a more genuine place, and being in a more genuine place just increases the field of possibility of every conversation that I have, and also the possibilities that I allow somebody else to be in the room, how they can express their ideas. Maybe like noticing that when you say something in a certain way, somebody has like a really subtle facial reaction, and you can just, rather than passing that, just go like, I just saw something. Can you tell me more about that? You know, just really be curious, really explore other people, and don't presume that because they reacted differently that they're wrong or you're right, or you're wrong or they're right, but really be curious, be in that moment and ask questions and really just keep learning.
Patricia, I'm interested to know for you in the sense of your own personal transformation, was there an aha moment in which you felt safe to be able to show up as a more authentic version of you?
I think so. Like, it didn't all happen at once, but there was a big change. The first 10 years of my career, I was in big agencies in New York, and very successful in big agencies. And what happened around year 9 is I started to have this really deep, soulful exhaustion. Like, I had everything I wanted. I had the big title. I was at a big agency. Like, everything was going my way, but on a soul level, I felt like something had turned off, and I didn't really understand it. And then between 9 and 10 years, that 1 year, everything changed, and I shifted, and I was looking like what is it? Like, why is this not the thing that I thought it was going to be? And I left, and I was offered an artist in residency in Europe, and I went there to basically live in the middle of nowhere and photograph farmers and be in a world I'd never been in before, learn a new language. And that was really hard and really magical. And when I came back, I worked with the same people, but I was an independent consultant and not with an agency. And I found that the quality of my recommendations and the quality of my creativity and the quality of my confidence changed so much, because I wasn't thinking like, what would the agency want me to say? What am I supposed to say? What's the right thing to say? That was in my head a lot before. And it instead became grounding, like, what do I think is the right thing to do? Where's the possibility that no one is seeing? What question do I need to ask? Because everything's on you when you're by yourself, Ben, right? It's your own company, like everything's on you. And that's where the real freedom started. That's where, yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, I'm wondering, have you had similar thoughts?
Yeah, I think I love the examples Patricia gave of, kind of coming into yourself at a certain point. I also, going back to the sort of the root of the question, when you comment about, not necessarily knowing what somebody else is going through, I present as the very picture of white privilege. Middle-aged white guy, grew up in suburbia, very white suburbia. And so a lot of people assume that I am, let's just say, willing to go along with some of the racist jokes or something like that. And obviously with a beautiful, strong black wife and 3 black boys, I don't put up with that crap. And there have been times when I've confronted it up front, and there have been times when I let it slide too much, because it's some client or something, and I don't put up with it anymore. That's for sure. But I think that this is a time where, for those who identify as a minority or an underprivileged, or there is a real movement right now where we need the privileged to step up, and I think we're seeing some of that more now than ever. So if you present like me and you're a white middle-aged guy and you're not taking action and standing up to the injustices and standing up to the crap jokes and standing up to the trash that people are saying or doing in places, then you are a failure as a leader and a failure as an individual, in my opinion. I feel that there are so many people who have struggled and suffered for so long, and the movements that are happening right now is their chance, if anything, to take a step back and let somebody else lead, because other people are finally stepping forward. I'm not encouraging any kind of slowdown in the movement or momentum, but us white guys, middle-aged white guys, have got to step up and grasp this momentum and stand up for it and keep that ball rolling. So yeah, I think it's important, exactly like Patricia said, to see those different reactions from different people, and get a sense of, if you're in the middle of a conversation and you say something and you see a reaction to somebody's face, maybe you screwed up and said something you didn't even realize. Maybe it was an unconscious bias, which can be an excuse sometimes too, but maybe it was an unconscious bias. Maybe you just said something you didn't realize, but be aware of it, be sensitive to it. And if you're too weak to say it there in the group or in the meeting, then follow up with that person afterwards. Go to them afterwards and say, hey, I kind of caught a reaction. Did I miss something? But be sensitive to it, be aware of it. We're not talking about just being soft, as some business people would like to say, oh, you're just being soft. No, this is reality. People have been suffering and struggling with these issues for so long that we haven't even realized if we are in the privileged majority, basically. And so that crap has got to stop, and we got to start fixing that. And I think that's what's exciting about right now, is we're seeing people start to awaken to that and start to address it. So.
I agree. And Ben, I don't know if you remember, I remember so many meetings a long time ago, but so much bad behavior was tolerated in meetings. Like people would bully each other in a meeting and talk over, and like the accepted protocol was, you just squirm and look down and like pretend like it didn't happen. And like, my hope for the future is that when those things happen in a good way, we can stand up and be like, just make it a no. That's not going to happen in this room. And any way that we can contribute to it being a healthier place for everybody, and not just turning a blind eye to bad behavior.
Yes, and I think I think those who fail to do that now, who fail to stand up for what's right and fail to, call somebody out on it, you should be doing that stuff for the right reason. You should be stopping it for the right reason, which is just it's the right thing to do. But let's be real. The other thing that's happening right now in this movement is people are realizing that the ones who don't do that are not going to be the leaders of the organizations in the future. Because if you're not strong enough and willing to stand up to that crap and start fixing what's broken, then the organizations aren't going to want you as a future leader. So I think it's important that people realize that this is the future, and you either get on board or you get left behind.
So wondering, and absolutely 10,000% agree with everything that's being said here. And I'm wondering, what is different about right now? Is that we're kind of at the perfect intersection of just so many seismic changes, the pandemic, which really, again, brought to light all of the inequalities that are very much rooted in the racist nature and the classist nature of our healthcare systems, to, to 40, what are we at, 43, 44, 45 million Americans unemployed right now because of the pandemic and just the virtual shutdown of everything, to the wide fluctuations in the market and the stock market, to just, I think, also just things that were already brewing and bubbling under the surface, but then are now also coming to head and helping to, Ben, thank you so much for saying and doing what you're doing too, because you're absolutely right. It's, the kind of the middle-aged white guys that really need to help us move all of the different movements forward. And, one of our shows, we talked about, the uprisings of the 60s and 70s, which were insanely important, but also a bit siloed when we think about the civil rights movement and then second wave feminism and the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. And even lately with, Take a Knee and Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement and the Women's March movement, there was more integration, but still those were very specific causes. And now it feels like there's something so seismically different that's happening in this moment in time. And is it because the stakes are much higher? Is it because we've evolved in the sense of how we think about unearned privilege and the myth of meritocracy? Like, would love to get both of your thoughts around what you think is really happening in this moment in time. Because I think it's so important to understand why it's happening to ensure that it doesn't become another slogan, right? At the end of it, when we all, go back, right?
And it is already being sloganized, that we're in this together language and the new normal. Like, there's so much of it that already is, but I think we need to surf those and get those out of the way, because there's a beautiful thing that's happening in the undoing, I think. But Ben, I'll let you. You want to take this one first? Sure.
I think you're right, though. We do have to make sure that doesn't get sloganized. When I gave a TEDx talk almost exactly a year ago, and it was called Be the Good. And in it, I talked about Martin Luther King Jr. saying, it was in Selma, Alabama. He was asked, why is it so important that he gets the TV crews there? And he said, he used television to get the word out. And he said, we will no longer let them, meaning the police, beat on us in dark corners. We will make them do it in the glaring light of television. And that's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of white people in the North, especially, who were apathetic to the plight of the Black man, especially in the South, couldn't turn a blind eye to it anymore. The horrific beatings were right there on screen for everybody to see. The dogs being sicked on peaceful protesters. I mean, it was just so brutal and so hard to see, but it was, everybody couldn't deny it anymore. And today's digital media is that amplified, right? Because even then, they still took time to get the video footage out. It didn't happen until next day. And you had to have a crew there to film it. Now everybody's there. And so you have, like one of your guests mentioned again, I think it was last week's show, in the same day, you had the New York City park incident and you had George Floyd. And all of a sudden, everybody sees it and they can't deny it anymore. And it's becoming harder and harder for the intentionally racist to deny it, and definitely harder for the unconscious biased to deny the fact that, hey, this stuff is still happening. So I think that is a huge piece of it. And then the other big piece of it is I'm a man of faith, and I personally believe, and I hope Patricia can appreciate this, it's a bit of an artistic thing for me. You take the colors separate and you can't understand why there's so many dark things going on, but when you put them all together, it creates this thing of beauty. And I kind of feel like there is something God going on, take your own higher being that you believe in, but I believe there's something in this movement where we're creating something positive out of all this negative.
Beautifully said.
Thanks. I can't paint, but I can describe it.
But I would agree that underneath, I think the power is that this is a species moment, right? We're all going through it together. There's everybody's struggle may be different, but everybody is being impacted. I think everybody struggles in some way. I know people who have lost their jobs and lost people. I know people who have made more money than ever before, but then the family dynamics are falling apart because there's a stress barrier that's been pierced and things are falling apart in a way that you wouldn't expect. And people are having stress illness as a result of this. So no matter what it is, there's some kind of mandate to be more present in your life. And these are real conversations. And I think everybody's, I don't know, maybe I like to make this up, but people are feeling a little bit less powerful in some ways than the old story. And so there's a collective rewriting of your individual stories. And I think that people are more receptive and listening. And there's power in that. And, I find that with my clients, I've had clients call me and say, I always thought we were a good company, but are we? Really, are we? Because the values are perfect, everything's perfectly said, and you can't find fault with it. But the question we're saying is, but are we really? And then, so what we've really been doing, and I think this is really important now, is we're really looking at language. I think language and the words you choose to give power to may be shifting. And I've been helping clients get under the skin of what they thought their values were and making them more personal, with more feeling, and a grander sense of commitment. And I think that, what we're doing in the work is really being cognizant of how our work makes people feel, not just the thing that you're saying about your company, but the energetics that you're putting into the world. Not to be too airy-fairy, but it's really important. Like, how you make people feel is important. The words you use are important. And don't just say things to say things. What do you really mean? And so this is the deep work that I'm doing with clients right now. And there's, for me, this is exciting because I feel like the spiritual side, the part that I felt like I always had to keep quiet in the corporate room, now there's a coming out of the closet, and I feel like I can use these words that I never got to use before. And people look at me like I have 4 heads. They're like, what? Okay, we'll have some of that, please. And I find it really exciting, but it's also scary.
Nice.
Well, Patricia, what you're saying is fascinating because it involves taking a lot of emotional risk, right? And so in ways that you're taking risk by coming out of the closet, right, with the work that you do, I think this is a moment in time. And it's so interesting because it's such a weird dichotomy of, the ways in which past technologies have served to isolate us, and, everything from FOMO to, just the anxiety and stress that all the research indicates are caused by being plugged in too much, right? And now we're plugged in even more because this is how we create communities through doing what we're doing with you both right now. But then also understanding that this is such a moment in time to be able to move past the old paradigms, create something new, but do it with such deep, heartfelt emotion, in the sense of you're showing up not as a manager, not as a director, not as a human being, not as an owner, but actually as a human being. And that, for a lot of people, requires a lot of emotional risk taking. Right. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what does that mean in the work, particularly Ben, in the work that you do around servant leadership? Like, what is that going to mean going forward for leaders, in the sense of just encouraging them to become more emotionally available? And what even does that mean in the workplace?
Yeah. No, I like it. And I think the example Patricia gave is a perfect one. In what I'm seeing with clients is similar there. I kind of view it as you have those who have always kind of had the diversity program, and they were checking the boxes and making sure, we got a candidate for the application process, and we got, I hate to use the term, but we got the token person here or whatever. One example of that would be a client I've worked with in the past who is, a stellar example of all things diversity from an outsider perspective. They've got all the right things written. They've got the right mission statements. They're making donations to the right nonprofits and stuff. So they're often hailed as this, city on a hill for diversity. But when you're inside the company and you look around, I joke with them in the past, they said, you looks like the 1980s in here. You've got complete lack of diversity. And they've changed more recently, but to their credit, they've been changing for a little while now. But the point is that I think that you've got those who sort of had the diversity programs are now shifting into okay, we realize it's not a program. It's about who we are and how we act. And the real leaders are stepping forward and saying that. They're saying things like, no, I'm not talking about just making sure you have a candidate in your interview pool. I'm saying there's no excuse. The big excuse corporations use when they lack diversity is, well, we reflect the geography we're in. But then 5 miles down the road, there's a city hub that's got a major round of diversity. So what are you defining as your geography? I'm sorry, you're not reaching out enough. There's no more excuses. And I think that's where it comes. You talked about emotional availability, and I'm kind of going into the actions. And I think that's what it takes the leaders that are really stepping forward. And frankly, the companies that are going to be the leaders in the future are the ones who are no longer accepting excuses and no longer viewing it as check the boxes, but as there are no excuses. We need to change. We need to practice what we preach, not just make ourselves look good on the outside world. And to do that, it means tough conversations, and it means people having to say, call it the bullshit, call it the bull crap. They have to come out and say, this is not acceptable. I need more people of diversity. I need you to not just find the candidates, I need to know that you're listening to different perspectives in journalism. I need to know that you're listening to different perspectives in your podcast. Your whole world has to be more diverse, not just a task you do during the day. And to do that, you're going to confront people who are still going to deny it. They're still going to confront you. They're still going to say, they're going to, when you're having a beer out at the bar or something, they're going to joke with you and say, yeah, but you don't really believe that, do you? And they have to say, yeah, I do. And you know what? If you don't believe it yourself, then get out, because we can't put up with it anymore. So I think, I don't know if that really gets to the emotional sense of it, but it's the emotional strength, I guess, is what I'd say, that we need from leaders today. And I'm seeing it from more and more clients, which is a good thing.
Also, one thing that I think with leaders today, I think there's so much responsibility put on them because, this is such a big time of uncertainty. And I observe my friends who are at the top of their companies, and employees now more than ever require a lot of guidance. Like, where are we going? What does this mean to us? What does our company believe? Do I believe what my company believes? Do we stop working with that client because they don't believe what we believe? They're not diverse. What do we do? And I remember a friend of mine at the top of her company, she was being criticized because she hadn't written the perfect response to Black Lives Matter in a day. They're like, well, what are we doing? And she's just like, and I think that there's, my observation is that leaders need to change the approach too. Leaders have to come to the conversation going, I don't know, but can we hold a vision together of what we want to make possible? And I think that the role of leaders going forward is to not to have the answer to fix diversity, because I don't think that you can fix it all at once and approach it from a systematic way. It's like, how can you shine light on new possibilities that you want to create? What are these harbors and beacons that you can, and people will see it and they'll be like, oh, that's what's possible. And then if we have enough of those and enough people are creating moments of awareness and shining the light on things, then collectively it makes sense. But I think leaders have to say, look, I don't know how to guide forward. Tell me what you think. There are whole new conversations, I think, that are happening at the top. And Keith Yamashita uses the term that he's right now defining the time with. He calls it where does the moral imagination want to take us? And I love this idea of moral imagination because it takes diversity not as a thing, not a system of checks and balances, but as rooted in the fundamentals of humanity and morality, and combine that with imagination, because what can we create from that place?
That's a powerful term. I like that. And I also want to reiterate what you said, which I think is so critical, Patricia, and that it is okay to say, I don't know. As much as I'm advocating for leaders to push back and say, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a great point, that now more than ever, it's okay to say, I don't know, but then go and find the answer. Don't sit on it, but it is okay to say, I don't know. And I feel for your friend who, it's such a massive movement to not have the perfect response within a day is something that they normally craft and, probably take months to do, Yeah.
I don't think there should be an immediate answer because it's not solvable, but it is demanding that we all be present, and it's demanding that we all contribute to it, and it's demanding that, and you have to give yourself to it, I think.
Yes.
I was in a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago, right as this was bubbling to the surface, and this person said, I feel stuck and trapped because I want to do the right thing, but I feel like no matter what I do right now, it's not going to be the right answer, right? And so understanding that just the process by which individuals are going through for themselves mentally right now, in the sense of wanting to do something different, wanting the end result to be impactful. But Patricia, really appreciated what you said around, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? To be able to contribute right now in the way that you can contribute, knowing that the solution or the proposal or the idea may change, 2-3 weeks from now, because that's how quickly everything's changing in the world as well. But to at least show up and be present and do something is key during this moment in time, for sure.
I think so. And one thing I've asked myself, because I'm like, am I in this moment for real? Is are we willing to change? We have to ask ourselves, am I willing to change my opinion and what I know? And I think we have to be willing to change as we enter the conversation, not approach it from the brain of I know everything, I've done my research and I know these things. It's what what do I don't know, and how can I be open, and I'm willing.
I think there's also a gender component to this as well, because women are often socialized to not act until they feel like something is perfect, right? And so, and so at Mayshad, we encourage women to, to start throwing things up against the wall to see what's sticky, particularly in this moment in time when things are changing so dramatically, but at least to take the risk and put yourself out there and to be out there for others and be present, even if you are struggling with the fact that you may not show up as your formerly perfect self, but to show up. And I think this is such a test of that moment in time where we need to really muster up the inner strength to say we're better than this. Like as a society, as a collective, as just, human beings, we're so much better than this, but it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be confusing, and it's going to be painful. But that's when moments of great change can actually happen.
Nice. Well said. My amazing wife went through a recent experience like that where she was criticized for being so vocal and strong, opinionated about a matter in the work life. And it absolutely blew my mind that anybody in this day and age would still recognize that, if a man did that, they'd be considered a strong leader. But a woman says that and she's being mean, or I think mean was the term, or unfriendly was something like that. Somebody had said to her. It still happens, obviously. And probably preaching to the choir on that one.
Well, and it's, I think also, and for so many different reasons, historically, women have also been hard on each other too, right? And so, in this moment in time now, how can we create different ways to form communities where we're actually truly supporting each other without the competition? Because in the past, and Patricia, maybe you relate to your experiences early on in your career as well, is that there weren't a lot of seats available for women at the top, right? And so there was this incredible competition that women felt, because they were not just competing with men in power positions, but competing for very few spots that were held specifically for women. Ben, to your point around being the token that's experienced on so many different ways, even today, right? And so what are the ways in which women, diverse women from, diverse industries, diverse job function experiences, diverse ethnic and racial backgrounds can really support each other in ways that we haven't in the past? When you think about even and you look back on second wave feminism, that didn't include all women. That was for a very, and in some cases, really served to exclude women of color too. So just even as women think about what does it mean to be supportive of all things related to social justice causes now, how can we support ourselves and each other in different, more meaningful ways, in ways that really, truly are going to be a part of solving, the equity issues that women face, pertaining to everything from healthcare access to, educational opportunities and employment opportunities, and how many women are on boards, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's not just a women's issue, it's everyone's issue, much like what we're experiencing in this country as it pertains to, the racial inequalities as well. And looking at the intersectionality of everything is vitally important right now.
This is, I think, an area where working together across generations, multi-generational mentoring teams really helps, because I find that I didn't grow up in a very friendly atmosphere, I feel, from the standpoint of how women treated women. You weren't sort of together and helping each other rise up. You kind of were manning your turf and just going. But I've been really surprised, because I mentor women who are more millennial age, and they come with such a different point of view. They really do help each other. They lift each other up. They believe in that as an expressed value. And that was so eye-opening to me. With my first team, I was like, you really feel that way, and it's genuine, and they're proud of each other. They create opportunities for each other. And so that was really helpful for me, because I was like, oh, it totally is possible. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I feel like that's one of the things that I've learned later in my careers. I've circled back to it. A friend of mine sort of defined the beginning of COVID as the great realignment of parts. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting concept. But what it's made me realize is that I've been finding some amazing, talented women that I write about. And when I say my secret mission is to shine a light, I'm bringing these women forward and they're amazing, and there is no competition. There's nothing funny. There's no grandstanding. The conversations that we're in right now are very grounded and very real and very authentic, and we're sharing. And I find that exciting, but it's not a given for the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to go back to something that we touched upon at the beginning of this conversation too, around the exhaustion of this moment in time, and knowing that, we're nurturing our families, we're nurturing our networks and our ecosystems, our communities, our teams. And we talked a bit about, exercising, and Patricia, I love what you're doing in the sense of the group that you formed. But wondering, from a leadership perspective, how do we all think about using this moment in time also for more self-care for ourselves and for our teams, knowing that we're still kind of all over the place, right? Like, we know that while there are different parts of different states and different cities and different towns that are reopening takes many different shapes and forms. And we live in a global community, a global business ecosystem now. But even here in the United States, there's so much that is open and so much that isn't open, right? And so how do we unify those perspectives when, we have clients or customers or teams that aren't necessarily in the same communities we are? And then how do we stay sane and healthy for ourselves during this moment in time too, knowing that the uncertainty is not over, right? And in fact, there may be more uncertainty before there's less uncertainty, particularly if we're going through mass transformational, social, cultural, and political change as well. And I know that that's a big question too. We would love to get your insights as to, because there are many corporate executives and entrepreneurs and business owners that are watching this that I know have this question in mind as well.
Ben, you want to start with that one?
Can you narrow it for me, Jan?
Well, I think about it.
No,
how are we staying, this is the narrow version, how are we staying sane and healthy and focused during this time period?
I think that would stay sane.
I think I would tie it back to what Patricia said earlier too. It's, it's okay to say, I don't know. I think people are looking to your leadership right now to show some sort of confidence, some sort of level ground. I think it's really important, if you're an employer, to be transparent with your employees. Everybody is always worried about losing their best employees. Well, if you're worried about losing your best employees, you weren't doing the right thing for a long time, because they don't want to stick around for you. I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it. And then you have a bigger issue. So I do think it's important that you're transparent and honest with your team, that if your income stream is damaged desperately, you'll be able to sleep better at night too, if you're being honest with them, rather than worrying about them, having to lose their jobs because you didn't warn them about it coming up and it's a sudden abrupt change. I think that's the negative side. I think the positive side is when you're candid and honest with them, they'll want to stay longer. They'll want to be there for you because you're going to level with them and you're going to be transparent about what's going on. So that's, as a leader, as an employer, that's a really hard conversation to address, a really tough thing to have right now, but it's important that you do. The longer you let that dwindle, the more painful it's going to be on you and on your team. And I kind of jumped into that. The physical fitness, I cannot stress enough. I'm not a morning person, but I've learned to become one since all this hit, because it used to be I could do my exercise at night. Now I've got clients in South Africa and other countries where I'm working in the evenings with them. So I don't have exercise in the evening, so I have to get up early in the morning. Make sure you make that time for yourself and get it, because if you don't, your whole mental state just goes crazy if you're not doing something physical, especially if you're quarantined at home and you're not moving, even just that little bit of a commute. But I think that's the most important piece to me, to keep your physical activity up, but be transparent with your team. They're looking to you for confidence. And confidence in saying I don't know is still confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Dodging the questions is not confidence. Ghosting the emails that are asking you, hey, are we going to have budget for this for next year? Are we going to, that's not confidence. Saying, I don't know yet. I think I'll know in 3 months. I don't know now. Here's what I'm thinking will happen. Mm-hmm. That is confidence. You don't have to have the answer to show confidence. You just have to be confident about what you do and don't know. So I think that's probably the most important piece. That, and yes, physical exercise.
Well, this is also largely about listening too, and being present and really being in the moment, which is,
Yes.
It's traditionally been hard for us, particularly because we now multitask in so many different shapes and forms. But yet I think that there's something very raw and very genuine about the fact of we're doing so many Zoom meetings, right? And no matter with teams, with friends or family members, we're literally like you're peering into each other's homes now too, for many of us for the first time. And so there's also a level of transparency when, for women, like, for many months, we haven't been able to get our hair done or our nails done, or we may not be wearing makeup, or, we may be wearing our Skype tops with like yoga pants on the bottom, like whatever that is, right? And so there are different ways in which I think we're showing up that are much more authentic and true and genuine to our own individual personalities and uniqueness is. But it's, also I think a large part of this is really just learning and being present in ways that maybe we weren't able to be in the past for whatever reason.
Yeah, Jan, I think that's so important. And I regret that I didn't hit out of your spot on listening. And I want to build on that real quickly and point out that with all the Black Lives Matter movements and everybody who's suffering right now and hearing all that negativity, one thing I've learned in the recent months that I frankly did wrong before is I would try and sympathize or empathize with anybody who was suffering. I'd always try and say, I know what you're going through is really tough. And I've learned recently that that's not what anybody who is suffering mentally right now wants to hear. They just want to know that, like you said, Jan, you're there to listen. So what I've started doing in recent weeks, and it seems to be overwhelmingly supported and appreciated, is for me particularly, it's members of the Black community. And I think that that's pretty big for most of us. But for anybody who's underrepresented or feeling challenged right now, just send a note saying, hey, I'm here. I'm willing to listen. If you want to talk, let me know if you need anything. You don't need to say, I get it. You don't try and empathize necessarily because you don't get it. If you're not living what they're living, whoever that case is, you don't get it. I don't know what you as women go through in corporate America. I can read about it and I can get a better idea and a better appreciation for it. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know what you go through day to day. I am here to say I'm willing to listen. And if you need anything, reach out. So Jan, thank you for, your listening is a huge component of it.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Patricia. So we're going to go to questions from our audience right now. This is one of my favorite parts of each of our shows here, where we get to hear from our community. First question: if you're going to take the steps to be more diverse in all areas of life, and not just from what had been said, checking things off of a diversity, equity, inclusion checklist during the day at work, where does one actually start? Are there any recommended podcasts, media platforms, or where anyone else can get training just to learn more about what this conversation is really intended to do? Any recommendations?
I mentioned earlier that book, White Fragility, which was also mentioned last week. Huge help to me in uncovering, still after 16 years of being married to a wonderful Black woman, I still learned some stuff that I was doing wrong. And it also helps for anybody, for anybody who's even slightly on the fence about, is Black Lives Matter just an overreaction? Or, I think anybody who has that twinge inside of them that just doesn't feel right about supporting what's going on right now, it helps clarify the history and the issues there. So I would highly, highly recommend that book, White Fragility. It's also available on audio if you, like me, don't read anymore, just listen. That's a big one. But also, honestly, I think just finding podcasts, if you're a podcast listener, that are hosted and authored by African Americans or people who are different than you, different than your normal, that's honestly the more important piece to me, is broadening your inputs, to a diverse input. Yes, it helps to listen on something very specific to diversity or to read about it, but it's more important, again, the listening to a book specific on diversity is checking the box, right? The changing your inputs and what you listen and consume every day, that's when you make real change.
I think this is fascinating because there's also, when we think about, networking, right? So much of what we do at Mayshad is connecting women whose paths normally would not cross, right? So women from really diverse backgrounds, diverse professional and personal experiences. But we also encourage, women who are in our ecosystem, to all of our viewers today, to really think about, how are you networking right now, and what ecosystems and communities and groups and clubs are you a part of, and are there new ways to experience and meet new people that push you a bit outside of your comfort zone too, right? And so think about, I always think about networking as something I'm doing each and every moment of the day, but not from a business development perspective, but because I'm very curious about the people around me in my world, right? And really thinking through, what are unique, new, different ways that I can meet people from very diverse backgrounds. So it may not be the same social club, and it may not be the same book club, but really thinking through. And I think right now, particularly in the digital world, there are so many opportunities to become involved and engaged, with various Zoom chats, because it's so many different webinars and podcasts and Zooms that are available. But I'm finding that it's really kind of those more intensive Zoom meetings where you're able to meet really diverse people whose you wouldn't normally meet if you were at a networking event in Manhattan or in Columbus, Ohio, or in LA, or whatever the case is, right? So highly encourage everyone to take advantage of those opportunities too. We have time for one more question. Ben, you had talked about having to respond immediately to situations now versus months prior. And do you find that time in the past was due to a lack of authenticity? Or does authenticity benefit efficiency and therefore affect all areas of the organization?
Ooh, can I try to repeat that?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, having to respond immediately to situations now versus taking months prior, was that time due to a lack of authenticity, like in the past? And does authenticity benefit efficiency and therefore affect all areas of an organization?
I think I got the first part. The second part, I'm not sure I got, but let me try. To me, again, tying in that it's okay to say I don't know, the speed of response lends itself more towards authenticity. When you take months to craft a perfect message, to your not to go against your friend Patricia, I think that's great, but it also often becomes less authentic. It often becomes less, it becomes legalese in many ways. Sometimes it depends on the situation. Having to craft it in one day, that's a lot to ask of a person. I think in the past the issue has been because we were more concerned about checking the boxes. And today it's more about doing the right thing. That's why I think it has to happen, why it's being pushed to happen faster now than in the past. That's not to say that statements made months ago weren't authentic, but they tended more towards just doing what they felt was necessary rather than what was right.
Do you also feel like, we entered a time period where, in very good intentioned ways, there were a lot of HR guards and walls that were up because we were trying to protect people, right? And so then that gave managers and leaders less flexibility and less autonomy in the sense of how they related to each other in meaningful ways, right? And so you became less of your authentic true self because you didn't want to be perceived as doing something wrong, right? So that was, one of the unfortunate consequences of the Me Too movement, where, so many male leaders and colleagues and coworkers and clients excluded women because they didn't want to be perceived to be doing the wrong thing. But by excluding women, that defeated the whole purpose of what was inspired by the movement, by the Me Too movement and the Women's March, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm wondering now, in this period of time going forward, there has to be some retraining or reorganization or re-engineering of how human resource functions operate within a company, understanding that, Ben and Patricia, like this entire conversation is around how we're showing up, being more of our authentic selves, when in the past, that most recent past, it may have been curtailed a bit because of people not wanting to do the wrong things. Does that make sense? And do we see like this moment in time, like there being a possible shift in that, just out of necessity?
Yeah.
I think so. And I think that's where I maybe it's not about speed and efficiency, but maybe it's about being present in that moment in time, not in a future moment in time, but in that moment of time, addressing what needs to be addressed with somebody from your authentic self, to use your term, Jan. And that's what's important. Whether the message is authentic or not, you can take a lot of time to craft a message, but I think that what's happening right now is it is more immediate, because there is no delay. It's like right now. The conversation is right now, and people need to know. And I think people need to feel what you're committed to and feel where you are as a human being. And are you committed to them? Are you really committed to this issue? And it's not always the words you say. It's a very intuitive feeling, and people need to know that you're in there and you're with them. And what is the possibility that you are bringing forward that they can be a part of? And it's really important to put words to that possibility so that people can feel it and go there with you, even if you all make mistakes at different, at any time. You want to know where you're going and what people believe in.
Beautifully said. I like that. I think it's exactly right. They want to know you're with them.
Mm-hmm. More than were you right or wrong, but are you with them? Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. And I think this is, I love what you just said there around just, it's not about being right or wrong. It's truly knowing that you're there, you're present, you're being authentic and genuine, and you might not have the answers, right? But you're there. Our last question of the day is, what advice right now would you give to your 16-year-old self? Ben, would you like to go first?
I'm still thinking. Be prepared for this question.
There will be a moment in the future.
Yeah. As it relates to this conversation, I would, I would definitely encourage myself to get out into more diverse environments. I grew up in, like I said, very white suburbia, and I didn't know what I didn't know until many years later. And I had a wonderful childhood. I love my parents. They did a great job raising me, but it could have been a much more culturally rich childhood, and I could have been better prepared for a lot of stuff in my future if I'd been exposed a little bit more to different diverse environments when I was a kid. That's probably what I definitely could have done better from that perspective. But yeah.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Patricia, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
It might be a version of let yourself be seen. Like, don't try to control all the different various versions of yourself. Let people see like who you are, and follow the things that call you from that place.
Beautifully said as well. This has been I love this episode. And thank you both for being with us, and would love to continue this conversation and invite you both back as well. How do our viewers stay in contact with you? How can they learn more about your work and stay in touch?
Patricia?
I'm happy to, viewers can email me. I'm happy to answer questions directly. There'll be a follow-up email. Feel comfortable to share my email address. You can also follow me on Instagram, but I'm very available for people. I really want to be in this conversation, and I'm very committed to helping in any way that I can.
Thank you, Patricia. And Ben, how do we stay in contact with you?
Thanks. Yeah, radiantforest.com. And as a perfect example of white privilege, I know my time is coming. I need to help more. So if there's anything I can do to help any of you in any way, likewise, let me know, seriously. But yeah, Ben at radiantforest.com is the easiest way to reach me.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, everyone, for being with us here today, and invite you to join us tomorrow for Workshop Wednesday. And we're having a very important conversation on crisis management and communication during this period of time. I'm Jan Mercer-Dahms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with joinmayshad.com. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and feel free to reach out to us with any thoughts, ideas, questions you may have. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.